Don't ask what ends the gods have given me or you, how much better it is to endure whatever will be. Be wise, be truthful, strain the wine, and scale back your long hopes to a short period. While we speak, envious time will have already fled. Seize the day, trusting as little as possible in the future. That's from a collection of poems written over 2,000 years ago by a man named Horace, originally in Latin. Carpe diem. Seize the day, seize it, trap it, possess the present, because the future is beyond our control. Indeed. But the next question is, can the present really be seized at all? Is it, in fact, ours to seize? We who grasp desperately for time only to see it rush through our fingers, like water through a sieve. Filmed over a span of 12 years, Boyhood is comprised of incremental slices of the life of the main character, Mason, played by Elar Coltrane. Picking up when he's about 6 years old, we come to know Mason as he navigates a childhood that's tumultuous more often than not in its major strokes, and colored with awkward moments and everyday banalities in its finer details. Though loving and well-meaning, Mason's divorced parents, played by Ethan Hawke and Patricia Arquette, are too young and therefore glaringly ill-equipped to be good parents at Mason's outset. So Mason and his big sister do what they can to cope with their lot in the various stages of their childhoods. And that's pretty much it as far as the plot goes. There are no cinematic narrative familiarities or dramatic archetypal plot points to assuage us. Nothing that smacks of convention to assure us that the sweet kid we're watching will emerge triumphant, overcome his adversities, and walk safely into the future. Instead, we watch the life of the aging human being on the screen, much the way we watch our own lives when we are at our most vulnerable, raw, and clear-sighted. That is, with a sense of profound uncertainty about what's going to happen, with an uncertainty that provokes feelings that vacillate in tone from ominous foreboding to delicious ecstasy. In fact, as in our own lives, mine anyway, there are no easy answers to be had for Mason and his family, no clearly defined right or wrong. Shitty things happen, along with the good, and kids and parents alike have to figure out a way to deal with it, to wing it, as Mason's father says. Now, this isn't the first film to show us characters aging on screen. Films like the Up series documentary and the Harry Potter series come readily to mind, as do the miasma of sitcoms that tried to freeze time for just a few years too long. Remember cute little Arnold from Different Strokes, whose TV aging was uncomfortable and slightly obscene to behold? But this film is unique in that, as a single narrative work filmed over more than a decade, it has as its major theme the transformative agency of time at work on a human being. The character's aging is at first distracting. At first blush, it even felt a little bit gimmicky to me, but that's only because I'm too jaded and cynical, and my first impulse was to quickly categorize it with the rest of the gimmicks I've seen in film over the years. However, about 15 minutes into it, witnessing the aging process of Mason and his family starts to become something remarkable. Seeing how a face actually metamorphosizes over time as opposed to the usual Hollywood aging makeup trickery is like the difference between holding a wild orchid in your hand, or a picture of one. It's life made palpable. As a result, without fully realizing it at the time, I found myself moved in ways entirely distinct from the typical emotional experiences of drama. Hours after the credits rolled, I realized that I was affected by this picture the way I'm affected by talking to the people I love about their lives. Mason and his family started feeling like members of my own. In the sacred space of the movie theater where we normally go to take shelter in the safety of fiction, it's unsettling to see the characters on the screen susceptible to the same tyrannical passage of time as we are. Reality crashes into fiction in a startling way here, and it's an unsettling, cage-rattling truth. I can't quite get words around what's at work here with this movie, but I do know that watching it was closer to an actual life experience than anything I've ever witnessed in a movie theater. Quite literally, the film is a living work of art. Linklater, as a visionary filmmaker, of course designed it to be such, and to reinforce this imitation of life, what he shows us in addition to Mason's major life events is a compendium of platitudes. Moments otherwise banal take on the greatest of importance because we begin to feel the weight of time pressing in on the characters. Moments like watching the clouds pass by or riding a bicycle through a weed-choked lot, looking at braziered breasts in a department store catalog when you're about 10 years old, squeezing mustard on a hot dog at a baseball game, a campfire talk about Star Wars, and finally feeling the courage to put your arm around the girl. This is what this movie is about. this parade of silent celebrations of which Mason is comprised. Life, we come to understand, is the collection of sweet banalities such as these. And if we can realize that, soon we come to know, through this film, that even the hardships are sacred. A divorce that hurts like an earth splitting open, seeing your mother smacked around by her alcoholic second husband, breaking up with the first girl you ever loved, or watching your mother's heart break when you leave home for the first time. This is the most difficult lessons this movie offers, that life's tribulation should be accepted with gratitude. Yes, life's shit should also be accepted with gratitude, for they are also sacred. They also comprise us. There's a moment that comes to every kid when magic as he knew it comes to an end. At one point, Mason becomes disillusioned about the existence of elves. His father makes a case that magic does exist in the world if you just look at it right. He cites whales. What if I told you there were gigantic animals that live under the sea singing songs and have hearts as big as cars? That sounds magical, doesn't it? This moment reminded me of an Einstein quote, something like, "You could choose to believe that there are no miracles in the world, or you could choose to believe that everything is a miracle." Boyhood is a kind of litmus test for these two types of people. If you're the type who thinks that everything is a miracle, you probably won't be one of those who walk out of the theater because you're bored. Instead, you'll probably think that what Linklater might be trying to say here is that every moment is a sacrament. It's no accident that Mason becomes an avid photographer when he gets into high school. Photography, that art form that attempts to seize the moment, to trap the moment like a rare bird in a golden cage. Now, I don't know if you need to just have had a childhood to respond to this film, or if you need the dual perspective of being a parent as well. I can tell you that my wife burst into tears in the parking lot after watching it, and that when I took my 14-year-old son to see it 2 days later, he burst into tears when we were all the way home at the front door. And that's the thing about this film. It doesn't pull on the heartstrings right there in the theater. It finds its way into some deep, carefully guarded recess and lives there with you. Obviously, it got to me in a profound way. This is the first movie I went to see twice in the theater in I don't know how many years, and it's still living with me nearly a week later. It also compelled me to break the silence of the cutting room summer hiatus here, mostly because it felt close to something that just happened to me personally. It was one of those clear midsummer mornings, and I was walking out onto the beach of a pristine state-protected stretch of land off the coast of Maryland with my family. The beach at that time was nearly deserted, and watching my kids walk into that singular East Coast dawn sunlight, I felt acutely attuned with the moment that was playing out before me. It was a moment suspended, and I was intensely aware of the fleeting impermanence of it. It produced a rapture and a simultaneous anguish. I knew that it would never happen again, that the four of us were who we were to ourselves, to each other, only for that instant, and that the next we would be changed. The moment would be gone, as would be the next, and the next after that. Words can't do it justice, can't hold it, but then neither could I. I had trouble containing myself, and not wanting my kids to see me shaken for seemingly no reason, I rushed into the ocean. There, leaning in against the waves, I realized that what's been called tears of joy are really tears of mourning for the temporality of all things. Seeing Boyhood a couple of weeks later helped me realize that, like Mason in the closing passages of the film, I was infinitely lucky. Now let me just say it, I was blessed. Not to have seized the moment there on that beach with my family, but to have been seized by it. That's it, Don. There's a little bit of a long one there.
Yeah, that is a long one. Unfortunately, we're going to have to go now, Joe.
Yeah, it was longer than the movie almost.
Well, what I'm interested to talk about right off the bat is, especially at the first half of your little intro there, you use the word plot a few times. And what's fascinating to me about Linklater, and he does this on a few occasions in his career, he makes these films that are essentially plotless, yet really entertaining. And I think that when you could accomplish this, when you could do this, you could basically just stop and take a look at life itself, the moment, a moment in someone's life, and you could really just put everything else on pause and you could just study humanity. Mm-hmm. And when it's done correctly, it could be a beautiful expression. Terrence Malick does it in A Thin Red Line. You could even go Kevin Smith in Clerks, Harmony Korine in Gummo. All these films have that all in common, where they just basically pause. They're not telling a story. They're just capturing moments in time. And when you do this, you could come up with something that is just entirely unique. It sounds like to me this is what does in Boyhood.
Yeah, I mean, it's it's reflecting life back at you, and I don't know if the typical, 3 act dramatic structure is too tired at this point. I mean, it still works in a lot of good
It's
films.
always going to work, you know?
Yeah, it'll always work. It's built into us,
Right.
There's a beginning, there's a climax, and then there's making sense of what just happened
Right.
to you. But we're so familiar with that when you're just faced with these little reflections of life back at you, these little slices of life, it's surprising and it takes you off guard. And when it's done well,
Yeah.
you get to realize how precious your own life is. You're just your life without having this big sense of drama, or heroic myth attached to it, and it becomes very sweet because it becomes very close to you, like almost closer than those structured plays and movies.
Absolutely. And Linklater, I mean, like I said, from his first film to his most recent film in Boyhood, this is what he's attempting.
Yeah,
And I got to tell you, man, I love these. I love those types of,
right.
because it is tiring to just basically, if you really think about it, we're pretty much just watching the same movie over and over again.
Yeah, I mean, that dramatic structure has been around since
Of
Greek
course.
tragedy and probably before, and for good reason, man. I mean, your day is basically a 3 act structure.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Like you wake up and it's the first
Right.
act, and
Breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
the day
Yeah.
introduces yourself, your problems get introduced, and then by the middle of the day you get it's like the second act,
Right.
and then you get your
And
climax,
if they're
and
not
then
resolved, you get a sequel with day two.
yeah, that's right. The next day's the sequel.
Yeah.
So, there's something that's reflected in nature by that 3 act structure. It's just depend, but there's also the other structures, that cyclical structure that we see every once and now and then, where you start off at the beginning. You know what I mean? So, we're pulling these narratives out of life, and I think this slice of life is really it's a neat way to just take a look at things and be like, it's just a different perspective on reflecting what's good about life and what's bad about life
Right.
to back.
Does this
You
guy
know?
get you excited, Joe? I mean, when you watch this movie, I mean, I mean, listen, obviously you have your family in tears, which, isn't, they're on vacation and Joe's like,
Right.
we take it to this depressing movie.
No, it's not a depressing movie at
All right.
all,
All
man.
right.
I
All
mean,
right.
these are tears of bitter, not like melancholy, bittersweet tears.
Celebration.
Yeah, it's tears of joy. Life's tears, man. I mean, it's very sweet. And we weren't on vacation when we went to go see this. Actually, I had been on vacation a few weeks ago, but yeah, I saw it with my wife, and she's obviously responding to
Wow.
the kid growing up and leaving the nest, which I'm gonna have to face in a couple of years or a few years or whatever. And my son is, and I saw this movie, and now Tom, the summer movies. There are all these movies that are
Yeah.
PG-13, and they're
Yeah, they're
like
awesome.
Hercules. I mean, listen, they're war and people smashing each other, and any kid can go and see that.
But now
They're
it's not smashing each other anymore. It's now just like destroying cities.
right, cities blowing up, aliens, whatever, just people throwing things into each other, basically, and that's all well and
Of
good.
course.
And those are all PG-13 because they're maximizing their dollar. And now here comes a movie along, and I'm looking at this, and I'm like, God damn, every kid should go and see this. And here it is, rated R. And the rating board will not let, a kid who's 14, 15, or 16 see this
Right.
movie, and that's who should be watching this
Right.
movie.
Well, does it deserve an R rating?
Man, it's and this is the thing. You have these PG-13 movies that are so fucking
Violent.
violent. But then you have this movie that's dealing with real life. You know, a kid in 8th grade who has to figure out if he's going to drink the beer that the senior in high school is forcing on him.
Right,
You know,
right.
or you know,
That's it.
is this kid going to grow up and have sex with his girlfriend?
Right.
You know, these are actual things that
And
kids
then
have to
and then
deal
a
with.
Michael Bay movie,
Yeah.
with Megan Fox like basically naked, like washing her car at the beginning of the movie
Yeah,
is
so they can't see a kid grow up naturally and have to contend with,
it's interesting.
an alcoholic father,
Right.
which actually might be happening with these kids. But they can go and see Hercules throwing a fucking, a stadium over at an army. You know what I
Right,
mean, or whatever.
right, right.
You know what I
It's
mean? So
crazy.
it is crazy, man. And so I was like, you know what, fuck that. And I took my 14, I took Anthony, I took my 14-year-old,
Yeah.
and he really responded
Well,
to it,
he's
man.
had an age now at 14, Joe, where you're gonna have to open him up a little bit, right? I mean, with what he's watching.
Yeah, well, it comes, it comes down to,
I
do
mean,
I
I'm
think
not
that he
saying you,
can
you
handle
need to watch Caligula with him tonight, but
well, no, I thought it was important for him to see
that's
this movie.
awesome.
That's it. I didn't care what the rating was. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
Well, I want to
yeah.
I want to thank you because I haven't really thought about Linklater in a while, and I was able to watch a couple of his movies, and the two that I was able to watch, I watched Bernie, which is absolutely phenomenal. Like,
It's funny, man.
it's I mean, I think it's beyond funny. I really think it's a work of brilliance.
He's that's when Jack. I saw it a while ago. Jack Black plays the Undertaker, right?
Yeah, yes, yeah,
And he
the
just,
funeral
yeah,
director.
that's right. That's funny.
Yeah, Bernie's like the perfect movie for Max Cook because it's got death, it's got that oddball relationship, that Harold and Maude thing going on in a
Oh,
way.
that's right. That's right.
It's got murder. It's perfect. The perfect movie for Max. But I was really moved by Bernie. I've watched it like twice, and it's funny that you say that you went back and you saw Boyhood, you took your son again because like Linklater, he's like a repeat offender.
Dude, I swear to God, I was thinking about this, writing this review yesterday and today. I was like, God, I want to go see it again. It's so weird,
Crazy.
man. Yeah, it's weird. This movie is weird, Tom. Like you're gonna see it, and it's not like a movie. I swear, it just feels like you should go. It's like going to visit, your family or something like
Well,
that. It's fucking, it's insane.
let's talk about the look of the movie. I mean, is there a documentary style feel to this?
It's very simple. It's not, and Linklater is not particularly visual film
Not at all.
director, right?
No,
You know,
it's all about performance.
yeah, it's about the story
Right,
and the performance,
right.
and yeah, the look of it. It's not like purposely handheld and shaky cinema verite. It's just very simply directed and simply shot. You know what I
Right.
mean? So but it's not like a documentary. No.
Well, he
Uh,
uses he uses Ethan Hawke, which he obviously enjoys doing because Hawke is like one of the centerpieces on that uh, trilogy he did, that love story
of
trilogy.
course. Yeah,
It's
before.
funny. I never watched those movies.
Yeah, you should, man. You probably dig them. Those are movies that, Linklater's career has sort of paralleled our own development, as because we started watching Slacker
Right,
when, 18, and then,
right.
through the years he's making movies for 20 something year olds, and this movie, even though it's about boyhood, it's very much about
Yeah, he's
parenthood. Really.
kind of all over the place with his work. What he really likes to do is, I mean, he loves realism. He
Yeah,
really
yeah,
he loves realism, and everything that he basically does is it's got this feel of life in everything.
yeah,
Even
absolutely.
his bigger movies. I mean, it's amazing. He's also done a really interesting movie called Me and Orson Welles, which
Yeah,
I really
with
dug.
is that what's that kid's name?
Um,
Okay, Zach.
Zac Efron.
Yes, that's it.
Right.
Yeah, yeah, that's a fun
It
movie,
is a
man. That's,
fun movie, and he
yeah,
just
I
like
like
he
that.
direct like he's really underrated as a director, man. He really
I
is, and
think so
it's
too.
and it kind of sucks because he I mean he just takes so many great chances. I mean, you ever see
Yeah,
Tape?
yes, freaking
I mean,
brilliant,
that's
man.
just
That's
one
another
set.
another
Yeah,
one
it's
with,
just in one room.
yeah,
The
which is that was based off a play, which you have to give credit to the play there. But yeah, for him to take that on, it's great, man. And you know what though? even though his films might not be making all that much money, although I believe this one's probably doing really well for like such a low budget type of
Uh-huh.
picture. You know, time is going to look fondly on this film. So
That's
like
great.
in 30 years, I don't know what else is in the movie. Like Hercules, I saw Hercules too recently. You know,
Why?
but, well, you know what the hell. But so I like in 25, 30 years, you look back on the movies that are in the theater this summer, and you know this one is definitely gonna Boyhood's definitely gonna be popping up more than Hercules.
Right.
You know what I mean? Even
Yeah,
though
right.
it made a fraction of the money, it's not about he's not doing it for the money. You know what I mean? He's doing it to express himself,
Yeah, I don't think he's
and to
ever.
invest.
Yeah, I don't think. I mean, even his bigger movies like The Newton Boys or Bad News Bears and School of Rock. I mean, he still puts in an excellent effort.
He's making movies as a mode of expression. You know, so some of them, you know, he's flirts with commercial stuff,
Right.
and you know, of course, that's great. But you know, you always expect that he'll be coming back to these personal ones, and yeah, even Bad News Bears, you could see that a
Bad
lot
News
of that
Bears.
stuff, like a lot of that stuff was so personal to
Right.
him. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Right. Right. Yeah.
Like he's pulling stuff out of his childhood,
Right. I mean,
growing
even
up in
School of Rock. Yeah, School of Rock. I mean, he gets to have fun with music. Which is
of course,
obviously a
man.
passion of his. I mean, if you watch Slacker and you look into Slacker, I mean, most of the people that he's using in Slacker are musician friends
Yeah.
and artist friends.
And one thing, the soundtrack in this film, it's freaking crazy, man. My wife and I were sitting there watching it. We were like, "This is it's almost like our iTunes on shuffle."
Ah,
It's just fucking great, man. I mean, the soundtrack's amazing, man. The Wilco, the Flaming Lips,
wow.
you know, Coldplay's in there, all this other
He
stuff,
loves
man.
music, man.
Yeah, big music
Yeah,
fan, man,
he's
and
totally
that soundtrack's great.
right. I mean, this dude is,
Vampire Weekend.
oh, nice. I like
Yeah.
Vampire Weekend.
Yeah, and it's great, man, because as the scenes progress here, you know, you're getting music that was like it's not the popular music, but it's music that had come out. So like, you know, that Vampire Weekend album, that first one came out what 4 or 5 years
Right.
ago, and you know, so when the kid is I don't know 13, you know, that's playing in the background, you know, and then
Nice.
like there's like this background of stuff, like there's the political stuff of you know the war and the re-election the election of Bush and re-election you know of Obama and
It's
everything.
all in the background.
It's in the background, but it's like life, man, because they're talking about it without knowing what's going to happen. You know what I mean? So
Wow.
it's not like watching a movie that's nostalgic for like set in a certain time. It's being filmed presently, and you have that sense that these people are talking about these things the way that your family talks about them without knowing. Like right now we might be talking about like this thing that's going on in the Middle East. We don't know what's going to happen in 2 or 3 years, you know. So okay, so like a good example is like when the kid was probably like 10 or 11, he's sitting out there having a talk about Star Wars with his father, and he's like, you know, yeah, they're probably never going to be able to make another Star Wars sequel, you know, and
Right.
they're talking about what it might be. But back then they had no idea that they're gearing up to, you know, unleash this gigantic reboot of the
Right.
franchise on us.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's like there's these things that it feels alive. It feels alive. You know what I mean? It's amazing,
That's
man.
awesome. I mean, again with Linklater, I mean, we're really lucky, to be young adults, and you and I, we were kind of like getting into film at the same time, Joe. You know, we're lucky because that early '90s, I mean, there's just a blast of dudes and women
Yeah,
that came along and were doing things that are just we're still talking about today.
yeah,
And they're
absolutely.
all, I mean, from Kevin Smith, who I don't like, but Linklater and, obviously Tarantino.
Soderbergh.
Soderbergh that's another great example. I mean, just look at Steven Soderbergh. Listen, every
The
episode,
Coen brothers.
right? Every episode of The Cutting Room, Soderbergh gets mentioned.
Yeah, it's
Tarantino
crazy.
gets mentioned,
Yep.
and they're all different,
Yeah,
And-
you know, and there's stuff coming out today that's interesting, man. We will, you know, that stuff just gets worked in naturally, you know. Well, it happens, man.
right.
It always
But what I'm
does.
saying though is that 20 years ago, it was a scene. There was a scene, and
Mm,
the concept of the independent movie became pop. I mean,
Right. I do know what you're talking about. IFC started coming out around
yeah,
then, right? Sundance
right,
had like started becoming like first
yeah.
started becoming really
Yeah,
popular and
honestly, Joe, I mean, you're talking like you take a look at Slacker, which just costs like maybe $20,000, $30,000. El Mariachi costs $7,000 to make,
yeah.
and they're using film. Now we're living in a digital age, and you're not seeing this. You're not seeing these really cheap films, you know, get popular on
Break the
this.
district.
Yeah,
Yeah, they're not breaking the distribution model is changing. You know what's changed? I know there's a little bit off subject, but the distribution is it's stuff that's online. So and it's being distributed not through theaters necessarily. You know what I mean? So you'll occasionally get something that plays in the art house movie theaters, but these 16 millimeter, back then these cheap indie films, they were getting the lucky ones were getting the distribution, and they were making their way to us. Now the distribution mode is changing, so in movie theaters they're putting all they're betting all their dollars on these big gigantic productions to get people to the movies,
right,
and everybody who's making these films, with digital videos is putting them out online.
right, right,
So
right.
who knows in 20 years what what's gonna emerge. So
Yeah,
I would love to see a really good distribution platform like a Netflix or Hulu or something really put together a movie, like start a movement. It's ripe for it.
it's
I don't
right there,
know
and
if it's happening.
especially Netflix. I mean, everybody's on Netflix, and I mean, they actually, they're making television series as well. So
Yeah.
they're starting to develop these concepts and these ideas. But I think I know what you're saying, because Netflix is in a position where they could take these young, innovative filmmakers and put them on the spotlight there.
Yeah.
And you
Well, I think Netflix. Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I think Netflix might be already too. Their business model might be already too set in stone. But I think it's just right for indie flicks or something like that. Or I think there is an indie flicks out there, or something to really emerge where they're curating really interesting films and distributing. They're being selective and distributing unknown filmmakers, and that's the appeal. You know what I mean? As opposed to Netflix, that's still just it's taking all the Hollywood product and pushing it out there.
Does Linklater get that spark going for you, Joe, to get behind that camera?
It does, man. I feel like I'm just too fucking old to go to be putting together these $0 budget movies.
Right.
So, it's just whatever, man. I do wish I was fucking making movies all like. It just kills me that I'm working at my day job every day and not making movies. But that's the way it goes. What are you gonna
Well,
do?
yeah, you always have this, Joe.
Yeah, that's right. You always have the cutting. Yeah, and I have other outlets, obviously.
Right,
So.
right, definitely. Well, Joe, it's been great talking to you about this, dude.
You too, man, and yeah, go and check that out if you can, Tom, man. So, I'm glad that you revisited Linkletter, man.
Oh,
That's awesome.
yeah. I mean, when I put on Bernie, again, it's like I'm already quoting, the film. It's just living with me. It's amazing what this dude does. And to
Yeah,
rewatch Slacker, Joe, was just a great experience. It
God, I
brought
haven't seen
back
so.
so many memories. You have to watch it.
I gotta check it
And
out
watch
again.
School of Rock with your son. He would love it.
Yeah, I think I did actually when they were young, when they were little. I think I probably did. I
That's the
gotta-
perfect movie for him,
yeah, I'll have to check that one out again. And
But yeah,
sit
Joe
down.
Slacker was just it's been one.
What were you saying? We had that on our answer machine.
Yeah,
What
well,
were you,
at
what
the
were
end of the film, this dude is driving around in a car, and he's like broadcasting throughout the neighborhood loudly about
yeah.
a free weapons government giveaway program where you could get like anything you want: knives, chains, bats, guns, so on and so forth. And it's just like this like 2 minute like diatribe, and he we put it on like it was our answering machine
That's
message. So when you
hilarious.
called our apartment, that's what you would get, this lunatic just spewing. And I remember it causing a problem because my girlfriend at the time, this is obviously way before the cell
Oh, I
phones,
do remember
and
that.
her mother, my girlfriend's mother, called the apartment looking for her, and she was like absolutely appalled. like no sense of humor about it whatsoever. And she was absolutely appalled. I remember having to explain to the mother, I'm just like, hey, it's just a joke, blah blah blah. It was in this movie. We found it funny. And she's like, that's sick. There's nothing funny about that. It's like,
That's hilarious. That's great when you're young and you don't give a shit about pissing people off. You just put shit on your answer machine.
It's so true, because now, like, being middle aged, I'm constantly worried now. I just used to like stick my middle finger in people's faces 15 years ago, literally.
Yeah, well, and now I got kids. I'm part of a community. Like I can imagine that someone's calling, one of my son's parents are calling the house, and I got that guy, that maniac, talking about the free weapons giveaway program on the answer machine.
There's so many maniacs in that movie, and some of them remind me of people that we knew in New Brunswick, Joe.
Of course.
Because that was so great. It's just, that's what it made me feel like. It just made me feel like being young, and it just reminded me of walking the streets of New Brunswick and just like meeting psychos.
Hey, are you a fan of Dazed and Confused too?
Yeah, it's taken me a long time
oh really
to get into that, but now I am. Yeah, for some reason it was something that I avoided for the longest time.
Really? And, the hippie thing. There's a lot of hippies.
Probably that, but I broke down recently, and now I'm like obsessed with McConaughey and Dazed and Confused because he's just so scary.
Dude, Dazed and Confused is a great movie. If like I did this a couple of times, like every couple of years I'll do this. Like if my buddies aren't around, I can't, it's a pain in the ass getting together with everybody, I'll just go and get a 6-pack and sit down and put that movie on, and it's kind of like just hanging out with my buddies. Yeah, just getting, having like 4 or 5 beers and just hanging out, getting busted with your friends.
Right. Yeah, it's funny how some movies could do that. I was watching Made last night with Jon Favreau and Vince Vaughn when I got home from work, and I popped open a couple of beers, and it was totally like that, Joe. I know exactly what you're saying. It's like you're hanging out with your buddies.
That's so funny,
which is amazing. But yeah, he does such a great job, Linklater, and I hope we could expand on him at some point and bring the other guys into some of his work, because he is absolutely fascinating and truly underrated. And if there's one thing I hope we could get through to the people that listen to the show, is that he's definitely worth exploring. I mean, if you haven't really looked at his whole library of films, it's something that you should absolutely do, because everything that he does is unique and fascinating, even the bigger movies.
Absolutely.
And he is totally worth it. Joe, thanks a lot, man, for coming on. It's great to talk to you. As always, the Cutting Room Movie Podcast is brought to you by Christiana Productions and New Media Limited. The show is edited and co-produced by Joseph Shrek and produced by Thomas Detloff and Joe Christiana. You could like us on Facebook at the Cutting Room Movie Podcast. Follow me on Twitter, Thomas Detloff at TCRM Podcast. And you could also check out Joe's film work at ChristianaProductions.com. Max and Adams, Bowler Hat Productions, and their Mimosa Podcast show, MaxCookandTheCounselor.com. Music from the Cutting Room is done by the Zillatones. Check them out at www.thezillatones.com or search for the Zillatones at Reverb Nation. We're coming back in September. It's just right around the corner. Until then, we are over. We are out. Ciao.
Really be seized at all. Is it, in fact, ours to seize? We who grasp desperately for time only to see it rush through our fingers like water through a sieve. Filmed over a span of 12 years, Boyhood is comprised of incremental slices of the life of the main character, Mason, played by Elar Coltrane. Picking up when he's about 6 years old, we come to know Mason as he navigates a childhood that's tumultuous more often than not in its major strokes, and colored with awkward moments and everyday banalities in its finer details. Though loving and well-meaning, Mason's divorced parents, played by Ethan Hawke and Patricia Arquette, are too young and therefore glaringly ill-equipped to be good parents at Mason's outset. So Mason and his big sister do what they can to cope with their lot in their various stages of their childhoods. And that's pretty much it as far as the plot goes. There are no cinematic narrative familiarities or dramatic archetypal plot points to assuage us. Nothing that smacks of convention to assure us that the sweet kid we're watching will emerge triumphant, overcome his adversities, and walk safely into the future. Instead, we watch the life of the aging human being on the screen, much the way we watch our own lives when we are at our most vulnerable, raw, and clear-sighted. That is, with a sense of profound uncertainty about what's going to happen, with an uncertainty that provokes feelings that vacillate in tone from ominous foreboding to delicious ecstasy. In fact, as an agency of time at work on a human being. The character's aging is at first distracting. At first blush, it even felt a little bit gimmicky to me, but that's only because I'm too jaded and cynical, and my first impulse was to quickly categorize it with the rest of the gimmicks I've seen in film over the years. However, about 15 minutes into it, witnessing the aging process of Mason and his family starts to become something remarkable. Seeing how a face actually metamorphosizes over time as opposed to the usual Hollywood aging makeup trickery is like the difference between holding a wild orchid in your hand, or a picture of one. It's life made palpable. As a result, without fully realizing it at the time, I found myself moved in ways entirely distinct from our own lives, mine anyway. There are no easy answers to be had for Mason and his family, no clearly defined right or wrong. Shitty things happen, along with the good, and kids and parents alike have to figure out a way to deal with it, to wing it, as Mason's father says. Now, this isn't the first film to show us characters aging on screen. Films like the Up series documentary and the Harry Potter series come readily to mind, as do the miasma of sitcoms that tried to freeze time for just a few years too long. Remember cute little Arnold from Different Strokes, whose TV aging was uncomfortable and slightly obscene to behold? But this film is unique in that, as a single narrative work filmed over more than a decade, it has as its major theme the transformative age. Don't ask what ends the gods have given me or you, how much better it is to endure whatever will be. Be wise, be truthful, strain the wine, and scale back your long hopes to a short period. While we speak, envious time will have already fled. Seize the day, trusting as little as possible in the future. That's from a collection of poems written over 2,000 years ago by a man named Horace, originally in Latin. Carpe diem. Seize the day, seize it, trap it, possess the present, because the future is beyond our control. Indeed. But the next question is, can the present